Hi, I'm Joe Spector, President and General Director of Arizona Opera. Welcome to this episode of Arizona Opera UnMic'd. I am thrilled to be joined today by two wonderful fellow singers, colleagues, people out there in the world of arts and media. Marco Camarada is a talented opera singer, voiceover artist, and recently launched his new YouTube channel, MarcoMeatball, which has already close to 90,000 YouTube subscribers, where Marco gives not only reactions to video game music, which is so impactful and so connects to the world of classical music, but he also peppers in there a sprinkling of opera once and again to expose people who have never heard about opera before. And we're going to get to that in just a few minutes. We're also joined today by Cole Skory, whose YouTube channels with his siblings, the Skorys, has around 2 million YouTube subscribers. They started their YouTube channel in 2012. And not only is Cole a wonderful YouTuber, but is also a singer himself. They're both tenors, so we're going to see how things go down today. But really, really thrilled to have you here, guys. Marco and Cole, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure.
So we're just going to dive right in. The first thing I want to talk about, this is Arizona Opera UnMic'd. So I just wanted to first sort of talk to you about the art of storytelling through song and what that means to you. I think that, from my point of view, that art, and especially with, the classical singing voice, a trained voice, sort of lifting people up and elevating the quality of storytelling, I think it's never been more impactful than it is or than it could be today. And I'd just love to hear from your perspective what it means to you to be a storyteller and to use song for that storytelling. Why don't we kick off with Cole?
Yeah, awesome question. I think music has always been a part of my life, my family's life growing up. We were super involved in musical theater. That's how I started, my introduction to acting and, productions and singing in general. And it was just such a perfect fix. It was a mashup of all my favorite things, costumes and acting and being able to, express myself through, these epic, stories and these magical places in fantasy. And we're able to translate all of that into our YouTube stories, where we have done numerous songs that, will randomly, spontaneously burst out during our episode through, ghost hunting or elves on the shelves in Christmas time. And really, bring such a special element of storytelling through, song that wouldn't normally be available just through film and, sound and acting. So it really brings a special, sparkle to it.
Yeah, sparkle is a good way to describe it. Sparkly Marco, now over to you. You've used your voice in so many different ways, but you and I share a background in professional opera singing. So I think you might have a kind of expansive view about this kind of question. But what are your thoughts about the power of the singing voice and storytelling may connect to your new YouTube work as well?
Yeah, I think storytelling through song and through singing, I think when we look at it from the lens of, especially of singing, it's the human condition. And I think a lot of times when we hear music on the radio or we hear music in a symphony hall or an operatic stage, what matters is that singing is such a raw human thing that is very unnatural to us. And in a way, it's kind of almost like there's a risque quality to it, where people we don't sing outside of specific venues necessarily, right? And so unless we're in the car or in the shower or whatever. But so to me, on my YouTube channel, I talk a lot about video game music. And every time I hear sung music, I take an extra bit of time to break down lyrics, to break down how a person is singing, whether they're using breath, whether they're using vibrato, whether they're using whatever. Right. So that's within the medium of video games. Then when we expand outwardly, when I recall my time on stage, it's been a few years since I've been on stage, but when I think about my time on stage, the reasons why I loved storytelling through music and through song was because it was a direct connection to another's soul.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, the mechanism of singing, as we understand it, technically is very complex. However, it doesn't cut the fact that there has to be that tether to people, like from one person to another. It's a sharing in humanity. And as you, of course, all of us understand, music, it's this thing that transcends emotions. And so, we talk about, not to get too verbose or too expansive, but we talk about, emotion. And when we talk about describing emotion, words often don't cut it, because song somehow, and music in general, somehow takes like the feeling of sadness or the feeling of happiness and elevates it to like a deep soul understanding of it. And that's the beauty of singing, I think. So I've thought a lot about this subject, clearly.
No, I think we have all thought about this, and I think that's what makes this episode so wonderful. I think the thing you touched on, I'm going to bounce back over to Cole now, but the thing you touched on that's so resonant is this reality that, the trained singing voice is so much more about stripping away artifice and getting to this almost primal quality of sound. And it's sometimes I think a mistake that people make. They think, opera singing, like this kind of manufactured sound. It's actually sort of the opposite. It's that direct connection to the soul, this incredibly primal thing where you're just stripping away all the tensions and so forth. Cole, what do you think about that? And I also want to raise, Cole, you're also a songwriter. And so there's this other layer for you, not just using your voice, but also creating new songs in order to, create that soul to soul connection that Marco was just talking about. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, Marco really hit the nail on the head about, it being such a, it's on a level of interaction that you just can't get with, just words. It's almost like two languages where you can sense the emotion of words and how you portray them, but also the tonality in the music and the way that their place speaks its own language. Mm-hmm. So it really is, it's harmonious on a way that you just can't get without, song and singing. So specifically with songwriting, it's so easy to be able to get on social media and, express how your day was, or express, the period of, your life, but it completely feels different with writing it and, how it's portrayed when you put it into a song, and it's so intentional with how you do it, and every, piece of it, and how it sounds and the volume and, the chords you use. It just, it really is a weird way to describe, like, I can't put it exactly in words, but it just feels so much more powerful that way.
I think that's it. It's not something you can totally capture just in words. And I would say that, Cole, with the songwriting piece, both the singing and the songwriting, both of them require this unbelievable amount of vulnerability. This is your voice, whether as a singer, whether as a songwriter, you're telling a story about, please be kind, I've had a rough day, bear with me, and it's offering yourself in this incredibly kind of vulnerable way. And I think it's wonderful. It's cathartic to be able to do it as an artist, but you do put yourself out there, I think.
Yeah. And it's a weird way to put yourself out there too, because we do that every day of our lives. Mm-hmm. But specifically with, putting out original music, there was an even deeper layer of, fear that was unlocked of, I'm releasing this piece of art that I spent so much time on. Why is that different than this video that we can post and get, plenty of hate on, without batting an eye. But, it feels so much more like, oh, I don't want to get, hurt by what someone says about this special, something.
Yeah. We love to be loved. We hate to be hated when we're performers, but it comes with the territory. And I don't think there's a way to make an authentic contribution to the world without taking the risk of someone not liking what you do. And and if everyone likes what you do, you're probably not reaching quite far enough, either outward or into yourself, I think. So that's a astute point, man. Well, you got to be vulnerable, right? Well, let's talk about taking that vulnerability and then just plopping it onto social media through YouTube. You're just putting yourselves out there, guys, through these various channels. But I want to just focus on YouTube in particular because I know it's, I think it's your respective power alleys. Marco, your channel's been up for just a few months, and I want to say that, you know, obviously there are channels out there that, you know, get millions or billions of views or what have you, but you just started this. I mean, this was something that from the outsider's perspective was this really entrepreneurial thing that just came about. From my side, probably it was like months and months and months of advanced planning on your side. But from the outside, it was just things that just popped open. And all of a sudden there's Marco, camarada, opera singer, MarcoMeatball doing these great reaction videos, and you have, you know, close to 90,000,
close to 100,000.
Is it close to 100,000? Man, that's like that's like in just a week
later. Yeah. 93,000 today.
And I'm thrilled. I mean, by the time people see this episode, I bet it's going to be more than that. So you went from this world where you're an opera singer and, you know, you're pushing every day to, you know, find the next gig, and you've sung in some wonderful places, including here at Arizona Opera, to this space where it's pulling you forward. And I know from things you've said in social media that you've it looks like you've almost been a spectator to your own sort of wonderful growth in that. So I'd love to just talk about what the experience has been as a performer, as an artist, as a person that's, you know, engaged in connection and laying it out there. And now you're in YouTube. What's that feeling like? What does it mean to you to have now close to 100,000 subscribers on MarcoMeatball? And you know, what is the message for you, or what does it mean?
It's a really interesting thing because for the 10 years that I studied and performed, and yeah, I mean, I was incredibly lucky to be able to sing with ASIO for 2 seasons and 2 shows. I think same season, or well, no, the next
2 seasons. Yes, Madam Butterfly is Pinkerton, and Tosca is Cavaradossi.
And those were dream roles for me. So to do them, you know, in such a safe place really meant a lot. And I look at them, both of those experiences so incredibly fondly in a sea of difficulty where you're constantly hustling for the next gig. And while I was like a special tenor or whatever, like certainly I wasn't guaranteed that a career would occur. And when I turned 30, I recognized that, okay, well, I'm finding that I don't think that I can actually sustain this like I thought I could. And so what do I do?
Right.
And as you understand, there's such a crisis of identity with that, where it's like, well, what do I do? And so I pivoted to voiceover. I know. So I pivoted to voiceover because I thought to myself, okay, I can still use my voice and I can still do this. And so that's been a 3-year journey, and it's gone really well. And I just sang a gig with TBS for The Big Bang Theory, and I'm still singing on my own terms. And I think that was like really before I dive into the channel sort of creation, I really wanted to find a way to do things on my own terms, where I didn't have to worry about where I had to go, and if I had to go to Europe, and if I had to fly here, and if I had to go here. And instead, I wanted to reclaim my identity as a person and how to build things as an individual after being 10 years of one track. So anyway, fast forward to February, you know, my father passed away, and it was a real moment of like, okay, well, who am I in the world as a man with a father who is no longer here, who was my big support system? And I decided, you know, I've always loved video game music. And in fact, I've always felt this duality between the identity that I portrayed as an opera singer with my tuxedo and my suit and my fancy parties and everything, versus this person when I went home where all I was doing was playing hours and hours of video games. And I was since I was 7 years old, I was enriched in this environment. And so I said, you know what? Screw it. Let's just try it. I filmed 3 videos. The first one was like an introductory video. And I just like kind of was like, okay, whatever. I look over on my YouTube channel and I'm starting to get notifications and I'm like, who the hell is sending me notifications on YouTube? This is so weird. And then I look at the thing and the thing's like the first video I ever made, 500 views, 1,000 views, 2,000 views, 3,000 views. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like a thing. So I immediately scramble and I start to just amass a bingeable catalog, which is what they say to do. So I filmed 10 episodes in a day and just of all, I was like, oh, I like this song. Oh, I like this song. And then I started taking suggestions. And then the next thing you know, the thing starts to take off. And since then, I treat my channel as a music appreciation channel. And, you know, a class you would take in college, a liberal arts, you know, music appreciation class, except it's all about video games and it's all exclusively about that. And it's about how they make us feel. And it's about what the composer's vision is and how I feel listening to it. So in theory, and then I jam out. It's like, it's a little bit showmany, but like I try to always keep an authentic, you know, thing, because Cole can tell you that people can smell inauthenticity right away. The camera is right here, you know? And so long story short, for me, and I've reached 10 million people now, and I feel like an opera ambassador where finally those 10 years of me being sort of selfish and having to be selfish in order to like get where I wanted to go. Now I'm sort of viewing it as like, let's talk about our feelings in an authentic way through the power of video game music. And hey, I don't know. It's a random niche, but it sure has worked beautifully. And it's evolving and it's great. Yeah.
We're going to come back to, you know, the bridging the gap in just a minute. But, you know, you talk about it as sort of a selfish act, being an artist and putting yourself out there. We're going to pivot to Cole now, but I just want to say, you know, it's not about, I find, and especially in this period of time, as performers are, you know, really on the front lines of art and willing to continue putting themselves out there. Yes, it's about you and making sure that you are able to put food on the table and get onto the stage and ply your craft, but it's also a massive contribution, the way you give of yourself. And, you know, I think I've said in any number of, you know, visits with artists so far, you know, just thank you for continuing to do this, because a room of general directors, for the most part, cannot become an opera. And without that, what you call selfishness, I actually think it's selflessness. Yeah, and I think this is true of all art right now. You know, we just couldn't do it. So Cole, you know, you got started in YouTube when you were 12 or 13 years old. And I don't know if you remember, you know, at that point in time, when I think about 12 and 13 years old, it's a blur, but it's closer for you. You know, what was that experience like for you when, you know, the Skory started first taking off? Because YouTube was a fairly early in its you know, birth at that point. I don't know, did you know it was going to connect, or what was that experience, especially as a teenager? All of a sudden you're getting, you know, thousands to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of views. Like, what was that like?
It was definitely not a normal experience. I remember it very clearly. And, you know, I was just having so much fun in that period of time too. Like, it was something that I always did, and I loved making videos. So starting out, we were just making videos for fun. We're like, oh, this is, you know, a fun thing that we're kind of doing. And then it continued like that for a few years. But as soon as I turned like 14, 15, that's when it really started kind of taking off. And we had conversations like, hey, this is something that we can do if we want to actually pursue this. I was a few years out from graduating high school and looking at career options. And back then, no one was really doing it as a career. We were kind of the crazy, you know, reckless kids in the family, not going to college, and we're going to burn ourselves out and then be living in our parents' basements for the rest of our lives if we pursued YouTube. Yeah.
And there wasn't monetization of the channel back then the way there is now. It's changed a lot.
Exactly. So I really have to hand it to my brother and my older sister for taking a brew of that, you know.
You have 3 siblings, right? I mean, that's a whole episode on its own, probably.
So they got the most pushback from our parents, and, you know, trying to get them to stay the normal route and go to school and get a degree and go into, you know, a specific field. So they really pushed and they made it happen for all of us. And it was, as soon as the numbers start coming in, you kind of get desensitized to it as a kid, especially. So you're just looking at these numbers and you're like, my video got, 1 million views and all of my friends are, posting stuff, trying to get to that point. So they're treating you a little different. And, you're kind of the most popular one ever because everyone wants a piece of that. And
the most popular one ever.
Right.
But who's counting?
It was weird socially because you didn't quite know who was being authentic and who was, just trying to approach you to, get a little piece of the action or like, a shout out or whatever. So it definitely was a little lonely in that sense because I never really had a solid group of friends who understood what it was like to be running a business at the age of, 16 and working a full-time job. And, you end up kind of growing out of it and then, flash forward 10 years and you're 24 and, you're still like trying to find those similarly minded people.
Oh, I bet isn't that wild? You're connecting with so many people, but in a personal space, it can be a challenge to connect because, everyone knows, the Skorys and, all of this. I can see what kind of challenge that would be. And so I'm going to take us in, another direction right now. So, we're talking about human connection. That really seems to be the through line for all of this. I feel like all the traditional art forms, but maybe opera in particular, certainly in my own life, we're at this inflection point where we're trying to figure out what it means to serve people on scale through this art form. And with a tool like YouTube, there's this kind of limitless kind of possibility that you both are really experiencing in your own personal lives. And yet, at the same time that Marco, you're coming on to 100,000 subscribers on your channel, Cole, just on YouTube alone, you're around 2 million. Arizona Opera is a 50-year-old organization. We have 766 subscribers, and it just shows what's terrifying about that is, man, we're not where we could possibly be over a period of time, but at the same time, it sort of exposes, man, there's something that's really possible and wonderful out there. If you were in this chair here and you were running Arizona Opera or another opera company, and you were thinking about how can I achieve impact and scale at the same time through singing and through opera in particular, what's the first thing you would do the first 90 days, thinking about social media in particular and maybe YouTube specifically? Let's start with Marco.
Tough question. What I've done on my channel and what I've sort of started to from my seat as a performer, I started monthly or bi-monthly now opera streams where we will watch an opera, and I get about 60 to 100 people that just come in and they watch. And they're like, oh my God, opera, that was like really good. Like Tosca, whoa, that's intense. It's like, it's like teenagers and folks 18 to 25 is like the largest demographic I see. And then of course there's folks my age as well. And then with this game that I have, my largest subscriber base, Genshin Impact, it's classical music with a modern twist to it. And it's fantastic. And in those videos, I talk a lot about Bach and I talk a lot about sort of the emotional connection that we feel through music and whatever. So what I've noticed is going to these folks through their medium of choice enables them to then have an open mind to
finding people where they are. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been the biggest thing. And I don't necessarily know that it's like going to a high school and doing outreach. I do think that those things work. It certainly worked with me. And when I distinctly remember seeing a performance when I was in elementary school of like some musical or something. And I was like, whoa, like that's cool. You know what I mean? But there's something just looking at the comments that I receive, and the most gratifying part really quickly, just to slight pivot, is to say that like people look at music differently because of how I've been able to get to them emotionally. Right. And so I think like our role as opera ambassadors in this case is to meet them where they are. Now the question is, how do you do that? Do you do it through comedy? Do you do it through I don't know if it's the traditional route of getting a TikTok account and making videos. Like that is still going to be a niche. So we have to like think, how do we think outwardly, and how do we think? Yeah, it's all very interesting. And the whole TikTok sphere has been really interesting, and not following other opera folks, but like branching off on your own. And I don't know. So the answer to the question, I have no idea, but certainly going to people.
Well, we've got the ball rolling. And of course, this is, I think going to be a path of discovery for us. But I think the powerful thing you said in there was, about finding people where they are, where their interest is. And you also mentioned interaction, which I think is so important that the people not just feel like, but really be in some sort of dialogue with you some way. And that even just that comment section, you respond, they feel you, and they know you took time for that. Cole, you're now the general director of Arizona Opera. Congratulations. Same question to you. You've taken all this knowledge, a decade worth of seeing what works, what doesn't work on YouTube. If you were in this spot, how would you be thinking about, how can I share, this kind of art form with people in this platform?
Yeah, I guess to start, Marco, TikTok is weird. I'm just going to start with that. My parents are on TikTok now. And as soon as that happened, I was like, what is happening? And, I think to that point, we're at the point in, social media where everyone is essentially connected. And I think, what Marco was saying was so true about just meeting the people where they are and forming those connections, in whatever way is the easiest for them, and not, knowing about traditional opera or, seeing the billboards out and about, or, other theater programs. I would say, the best thing that I would be able to, advise you on would be just really targeting who that specific niche is that you're wanting to target.
Right.
And then just really go after them on social media, and not to underestimate the algorithm. It is the most wild thing, and it is so good now, even better than what humans were able to do at laser pointing in someone's interest and delivering them whatever ad that is, or whatever video that is, or preview for an upcoming opera. It will find them if you're able to find out where that maze path lies.
Yeah. And what is that algorithm except, listening to what people's habits are and who they are? I say data is people, when you're looking at a number of folks that, watched a YouTube video or something like that, it is the algorithm, but it's also you dialing into where are people, where am I finding them? And, it's just a fascinating thing. And I'm so Marco, just as a fellow opera singer, I'm so proud and excited for, this pathway that you've started on, and for both of you, just excited about all the entrepreneurship and experimentation that you engage in, every day. It's just so creative. It's so interesting. And I think, we in the opera field really have like so much to learn. And, I'm just excited that to have the conversation with you both today. You've been so generous with your time. Marco, Cole, thank you so much for being with us today on this episode of UnMic'd, and look forward to staying in touch and keeping this conversation going.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, thrilled to be back.
Thank you for having me.
Great to see you guys.